The way I'd like to do this is we're going to go for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have about a 5-minute break. We'll have a 10-minute question and answer session, then we'll do another 30, 35 minutes, another 5-minute break, another 10-minute question and answer session. We'll finish the presentation, and we'll have more question and answers at the end. So please feel free to ask any questions and things you might have as we go throughout this, and periodically throughout the course of this brief seminar, we'll discuss them. Just to give you all a little background about myself, my name is Chris Kimball. I got my master's degree in structural engineering, and I was a designer for a long time. And then my wife wanted us to move to Utah to raise our kids out there, and so we moved out there, and the only job I could find at the time was actually with Salt Lake City as a structural plan review engineer. And I thought it was a stepping stone to get on with a design firm again, but I found that I loved it. I loved being in the codes, and so for the last 12 plus years, I have been a code professional and more of a building official than an actual engineer. But I do love the codes, and I love the existing building code. I think that this is more and more of us are getting into this more now than we have in the past, because with the changes in the 2015 codes, much of it was removed in the IEBC, and now we're having to use the existing building code. I think it provides a lot of leeway and flexibility to us as designers, but also to the jurisdictions. With that, we'll go ahead into this, and as you can tell right from the title, this is an introduction to the IEBC. There's no way that we can, in 2.5 hours, cover everything there is to know, but we're going to go through it and have a pretty good summary of how it's laid out and make sure we have a good understanding of it. So the way I've kind of formatted this is, first we'll have an introduction. We'll talk about the first few chapters and how they're laid out in the IEBC. We'll cover the 3 different methods: the prescriptive, the work area, and the performance. And then we'll do a brief summary. So first of all, Part 1. The one thing I would note right here in Part 1 as far as an introduction, this is like a main street in anywhere USA. All throughout the U.S., in a lot of our cities and jurisdictions that have been around a long time, we're going to see a lot of older buildings. Many of us are constantly dealing with existing buildings. We might see them more often than we'll see new construction. There is a lot of existing infrastructure out there that we have to deal with. And obviously the older types of buildings, there was a lot that we didn't yet know, and a lot of things we were still learning. And these would be classified as unreinforced masonry structures here on this main street, which, if you're in a high seismic country, that's not the ideal type of building that you would have. So the purpose of the IEBC, the purpose is to encourage the use and the reuse of existing buildings while requiring reasonable upgrades and improvements in code compliance. It provides, it doesn't lessen the life safety requirements per se that you would have out of the building code if you're being fully compliant, but it creates a reasonable approach. For example, on the structural, if you trigger something, the idea is that people will be able to get out of the building. It may mean that you might still have damage, more damage than you would to something that's fully constructed in accordance with the current building code requirements, but people will be able to get out and they will be safe. So a history of existing buildings and what we have. So back in the 1927 Uniform Building Code, it provided a little snippet, and it said that any time that you were to complete an upgrade of an existing building, if the cost of the alterations or the repairs exceeded 50% of the building value, now you were going to have to upgrade everything. That was all we had at that time. Before we merged the Uniform Building Code and BOCA and SBCC, before we merged them into the international codes, the last version of the Uniform Building Code in 1997 just had one page that addressed some of the specific requirements that you might have in relation to additions, alterations, repairs. or change of use of the existing buildings. Now, in the 2012 International Building Code, since the 2000 all the way up to the 2012, we had Chapter 34 in the IEBC, which covered existing buildings. With each cycle, there was more and more information being brought in.